Hi, Don Wood. I have been a beginning gardener for 25 years now, and so I'm teaching a beginning gardening class, right? My wife and I have a small farm. We farm our yard. We grow about 2,000 pounds of food every year, and basically provide all of our vegetables that we need for the year out of our yard, which is a normal city lot. So
700 square feet?
our actual garden space, including 10 trees and an orchard, is just over 700 square feet. So that's how much active work. And that's really one of the keys to gardening is, like, this is just amazing and beautiful. But if we were to try and farm this whole space without equipment, you would need a lot of people. But you can grow a lot of food in really small areas if you've got really good fertility and really good soil, which is what they've built here. So how many people here already garden? I know you do. Intermittently. So as gardeners, what we've been taught traditionally is that we have to tame the soil. We have to control it, right? No, if you look at a forest, there's nobody watering those trees, there's nobody weeding those trees, and yet they're growing trees that are 50, 100, 150 feet tall, because nature has figured out how to build soil and how to make it so you can grow food, right? We like specific things, which is fine, but we've been taught basically since World War I that you need chemicals and you need to fight the soil, to fight the things that are living in the soil. And it's the wrong approach. It's destroyed our farmlands. When they first started farming Iowa, there was 18 feet of topsoil from the grasslands. 18 feet. On average in Iowa now, there's 18 inches of topsoil. So we have squandered close to 20 feet of fertility. It's all now somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico.
You bring up a really good point, because grasslands are full of perennials, which perennials have root systems that go 15 feet, and they build the soil and they hold it in place. And when you switch from perennial to annual, you create a lot of like erosion, or like the depth starts to change, you know, and you have runoff and so forth and so on. So yeah, anyway.
So what we've built here are what's known as lasagna style beds. And really all we're doing is mimicking a forest floor. So a forest, the tree grows up, underneath it annuals grow up. Weeds. Weeds are just plants that aren't growing where you want them to, right? That's the definition of a weed. So you could have sunflowers that are weeds. I was just at somebody's house and they had all kinds of peas coming up that they didn't plant. So those are weeds, right? She's taking them out, what she wants in that spot. So weeds grow up. Fall they start to die back, or during summer they die back. Fall leaves turn brown, fall on top, make a really thin compost pile. Every year that happens, it gets bigger and bigger. Soil life builds up, starts breaking that down. That's what actually allows giant trees to happen, right? If it wasn't for that fertility that's being created by the sun and the nitrogen in the air, nothing would grow. So when they tell you you need to buy chemical nitrogen because there's not enough of it in your soil, they're fibbing. Or they've let you kill your soil to the point where there is no nitrogen. So the nitrogen that you feed your plants with, again, nobody's doing that in the forest. So who's doing that? And that is the soil life, the bugs in the soil. A healthy cup of soil has over 1 billion. Billion, you know how many a billion is?
How many zeros?
It's a big number, right? And just in 1 cup of dirt, of good healthy dirt, more than 1 billion life forms. Okay? And so the organic stuff doesn't provide the nitrogen directly. You need the animal life, the bug life in the soil to eat that organic material, and their excrement is creating the chemistry, right? And they're moving around and eating, and so it's not all going in one spot. So then somebody noticed that at the end of World War I, they had big piles of nitrogen pellets, because that's what you make bombs out of, is nitrogen and diesel fuel. That's how you make a bomb. Some bright young chemist noticed that the grass was really green around the nitrogen piles. And then somebody else said, or his wife probably said, well, yeah, because there's nitrogen in the soil that feeds the plants. And an industry was born. And since then, that's what we've used to feed our plants. But if you think about it, the stuff that's making all that work in your soil is these bugs. If you take what's their waste product and flood it over the top of them, they're either going to leave or die. Because if somebody flooded your waste products on top of you, you'd be unhappy. So you can't do both. That's probably one of the biggest beginner mistakes. Is people go, I'm going to grow organic, but to give it a start, I'm going to throw in a little chemical fertilizer just to get it going. It's just the opposite of what you need to do. That will slow it way down. Plants will burst out and grow quickly, and then you'll go, well, how come they died off by midsummer? You can keep feeding them. The chemistry just washed through into your groundwater, but the bugs that were going to feed your plants all summer have all gone away. So the concept here is we've built layers of green and brown, which is essentially a compost pile, but in place. And so you build that up. Teresa has put beautiful sifted soil on top to make you feel better about gardening in it. But the truth is, there's no reason to do that. There's no need for it, other than seed starting in soil is easier, because it's easier to keep it uniform, because the size of the particles are smaller, they'll hold a little moisture against them. But if it's not covered, you see how brown or how dry this looks already. And if you, let's see if we can. Yeah, see, that's dry all the way down already.
Can I also interject and just say that Mary Ellen over here, this is her bed, she's got 2 garbage cans that have mulch that are soaking in water for that very reason. So she's putting wet mulch on top of the soil to hold that moisture in.
So one of the keys to building a successful soilless garden or mulch garden or whatever is going to be to water each layer as you build. Just to get that stuff pre-soaked. Did it rain here yesterday like it did in our house? So there's 3/4 of an inch of rain into these beds yesterday, which is great. And now, with all the organic that's in there, it's just going to soak that water up like a sponge and stay. Whereas if it's just dry, hard subsoil, that water just trickles down to the water table, wherever that is, which here is probably 300 feet.
Don, what do you think about, because we have minimum 2, some beds have 3 different manures in them at different ages. And so when we were collecting manure, we had less than 6-month manure, 6 to 1 year, over 1 year. What's your opinion or experience with different ages of, not all manure is created equal, so.
Absolutely. Really, there's so many variables that it's hard to say. I mean, some of the most successful beds I've ever built have been made with just fresh green horse manure. But they were people who were very particular about their hay source. They did a lot of their horse manure was from pasture raising their horses. One of the risks with hay is that hay farmers use a persistent herbicide that'll actually go through a horse and still poison your soil. So lots of variables. That 3-year-old soil or 3-year-old compost is it's really beautiful that we got from Havomeister. It's gorgeous stuff.
4-year-old.
4-year-old, but it wasn't nearly as as fertile as the 2-year-old stuff because more of it had washed through.
Interesting.
Isn't goat or rabbit better to use than horse or cow manure?
So the advantages some manures have over others is that they're actually harder to break down by the bugs, and so consequently the bugs don't break them down as fast. So rabbit and goat slow that process down and don't burn your plants by creating too much nitrogen.
Yeah, they're neutral.
Right. So what can happen with horse manure or chicken manure is that because there's so much food in there, the bug colonies can get really big and create a lot of chemistry that will...
So good for the first year. Maybe.
So yeah, it would be good to build your beds out of as long as you can wait a couple weeks. Really, that's all it takes.
You mean for goat and rabbit? Or?
No, for any of the hot stuff. Again, it really also depends on, like on my compost bins, what I do is I keep a bucket of garden soil near my compost bin, and as I add, I throw in a little bit of handful. So basically I'm pre-charging the bug colonies into the middle of the pile.
What's in some food that makes it hot? What is it, like chicken?
Can
like
you repeat the question?
What's in some poop that makes it hot?
So it's not really hot. When they say it's hot, it means that the bugs can break it down faster.
Okay.
And so there'll be a bigger colony creation and consequently more waste product and make it too much nitrogen, too much chemistry. So it's just too much activity.
Which can burn your roots.
To burn your roots, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what they mean by when they say it's hot.
Okay.
So again, part of the problem is up until 10 years ago, almost all gardeners were taught to be chemists. Not biochemists, chemists, right? Because that was who had taken over the farming industry and still owns the farming industry, is the chemistry industry, the chemical industry. So, these kind of things persisted. Oh, you can't grow in horse manure, you can't grow in chicken manure because it's too hot. You can, you have to wait a week or two, but...
What I've heard with chicken manure, because I have a coworker who raises chickens, sometimes I get eggs from him. And sometimes I get chicken manure from him. So 3 of us went over and shoveled out his chicken coop and we got some manure for it. But what I've heard with chicken manure is it has to sit and age for about a year. So too much nitrogen anyway. But if you let it sit, it's great.
Very great.
Yeah. So we use chicken manure. We keep it. We harvest it all winter long. I stir it in with my leaves right now, and it just goes on to, or right on top is mulch on our beds.
Can you do like a mixture of chicken, like rabbit and goat?
Yep. You can, pretty much all manure is full of waste product that's good for your garden. The risk is if you add too much of one thing, basically like everything in life, too much of one thing is not good for you, right?
Well, I guess I'm asking, like, when you're starting out, like, it's your first garden plot in that area and you have to create the soil. I mean, when you're doing the first plot, you want to have your plants grow and nourish. And I guess, how do you make that happen if really permaculture is more of a slower, long-term process?
But these beds are 3 weeks old, and I guarantee you can plant stuff in these and grow huge
But there's no
vegetables.
chicken manure, right? Or
There is chicken manure.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's all kinds of manure. So again, if you encourage a healthy ecology, then all these problems are not problems. It's when you try and just use chicken manure on a chemical garden that you've killed all the biology in, then yeah, it's going to take a while, and what's going to happen is all the biology is going to rush to that chicken manure, and you're going to have concentrated problems. So the first year we built a garden at the Anchorage Waldorf School, we built beds like this, 24 inches deep, with just our old leaves, some old straw. They used to put we put straw out at the bottom of the sledding hills because there's like fire hydrants and stuff, so the kids don't crash into them. So there's always bales of straw lying around that are kind of spoiled. Wood chips over cardboard, just like this, and then built the beds on top of a hard packed play area that was just, it was rock. You couldn't, digging the posts was brutal to build the fence. And then we built these beds again with green, fresh horse manure. The kids were, oh my God, it's so terrible. We watered it in as we built. We waited a week and we planted. All the mothers were like, oh, I can't believe you're going to do this to the kids. You're going to have so many weeds. They're going to hate it, blah, blah, blah. So well, this is just what we had this year. We'll do what we can. Well, I explained to the kids, you know, it might not work. I knew it would, but I told the kids to make their parents happy that it might not work. We planted, we mulched. So mulch is another real key to having a successful garden. That again, chemical gardeners have been taught that's bad. But if you mulch your gardens, what takes for weeds to germinate is sunlight. If you put mulch 2 inches thick on your gardens, you're going to get very few weed germinations. So
you put on after you plant the seeds?
So yes, if you're planting seeds, you have to leave the mulch off and weed the weed seeds that germinate with your other seeds. Mulch gardens are best if you put transplants, but obviously there's some things you can't transplant. And then, so then like to grow seeds, you have soil here, you put your seeds into the strip, and then you can mulch all around where you planted your seeds. But the seed will need, and then you'll have to weed the little spots that you leave uncovered, really.
Can I share what some things that we've learned? Not all mulch is created equal. So you can do different things with different mulches because they come from different trees. And so what we're standing on here is spruce. And we just got a load of birch, which is a hardwood. And we put birch around the perimeter of this garden and then all along the fence line. So you can actually see the difference. It's like 4 feet of birch and then it goes into spruce.
Yeah, the birch is whiter.
And we mixed it really heavy with the oyster mycelium waste because we got a waste from it's an upcycled product, and they grow in hardwood, so they don't grow in spruce. Spruce has a chemical that retards the growth of grass, so it is good for pathways. So knowing your mulch can open up a whole new set of doors of what you can do with it. Yesterday, I got a load of red hemlock, which I did a bunch of research. It's also a hardwood, so I'm going to do more mushroom growth experiments.
You say it's bark, not...
It's a bark, yeah.
So hemlock,
red.
Bark is different than wood.
Right.
It's a different properties also. So like you can mulch an annual garden with bark. You don't want to mulch an annual garden with hardwood or with wood chips.
Right. The other thing about the red hemlock that I read is that it deters slugs. So I'm going to mulch my beds here in the garden with this red hemlock and learn if it does indeed have slug deterrent properties, because that's huge. And it's this gorgeous red color, which is really, like, for me, I design beauty in my garden spaces as, like, you know, growing food and beauty are my number ones. You know, so flowers, everything goes in, and the color of my mulch matters to me. You know, deter slugs. Wow, great.
Bonus.
Yeah, bonus. Stacking functions.
Stacking functions, exactly. So when I'm talking mulch on the garden beds, I'm meaning leaves and grass or some combination of that generally. Something that the issue with wood chips is they will actually require more nitrogen to break down. So they'll actually rob your garden of nitrogen in the early part of their breaking down, and then it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets trapped for a while. So if you're growing perennials, wood mulch, good. Growing annuals, wood mulch, bad. Easy way to remember it, right? And I mean, that said, again, we do the same thing. We mulch all of our pathways with wood mulch because it deters weeds, keeps it from getting muddy in the garden. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but in the fall we tend to get some rain. So reducing the mud is a good thing. And then, so back to planting in these beds, you literally just take your dig a hole with your hands. This is when you have healthy soil, this is the tool you need for almost all the work in the garden. Don't need much in the way of sharp, heavy tools, unless you happen to have a really aggressive cottonwood in your garden, like we do. And then every couple of years we have to get rid of cottonwood branches so that we can plant. If they're aggressive, they'll take over the But so you just pull it away, and you're gonna go, well, there's not even any soil here, right? So you can put a little compost in the bottom, take your plant, stick it in there, just pack everything down and water it in. And so we did this at the garden at the school and mulched, and everybody said, oh, we're gonna be back every 2 weeks to weed and make things ready. Well, you know, school, that doesn't happen at school. So we had kids come back the first 2-week session. We probably had 6 kids out of the 20 that were in the class. And then basically we didn't have anybody else come the whole rest of the summer. Nobody ever watered. We got back in September and there was 350 pounds of vegetables in this garden that was about a quarter. Like those 2 fence panels there and 2 fence panels there, about that big square. So with healthy soil that you can create, you can grow a ton of food. It's actually harder to take established grass soil and dig it up and use the stuff that's there because, again, you don't have much biology. So building right on top is the best way. The other thing I'll tell you is, so these gardens we built 24-inch deep. By the time they broke down the next spring, they were about 2.5 inches deep. Because that stuff broke down that much. And then it got down to there was cardboard and then the hard packed grass. But by that next year, that next spring, I could take my hand and go in this far into this much soil. So it had the biology had gone through the cardboard, eaten the cardboard, and come up from the ground and tilled the top 4 or 5 inches of the soil for me as well.
And so then you create more by just continuing to do
So you just
the
keep adding to
layering
the top.
every year.
Exactly.
How long does it take to build up like 12 inches of soil? Like, I mean,
Well, you don't need, because it builds down.
builds down, I guess.
So you just want to keep adding to the top because, so you're harvesting annuals. You're taking that plant material that's actually supposed to go to feed the soil. You're taking it to feed you. So you have to replace that. And that's the part that we've tried to get away from by using chemistry, right? But the truth is you have to replace it somehow, either with chemistry, which kills the biology, and you get hard packed soil and you have all these other things you have to do, or by adding fresh mulch every year. Now we don't, at our gardens at home, we mulch 2 or 3 inches every year after we've planted out. That's what we've been doing all week, filling in the patches around our garden. So our plants all have 2 or 3 inches of soil around them. Our carrots don't yet because they're still only this big, but everything else is already mulched in. And we will add about that much again in the fall, and that's what we'll do. That'll be all the feeding we do for next year's start. So we had 6 inches-ish of leaf mulch and compost.
How about if you're going to start a new raspberry bed, do you use the same formula even though you...
Well, raspberry, you use wood chips on top.
Okay, but this summer I wanted to make a new bed because the neighbors don't want their raspberries after the season, so we said...
Yeah, so just build a bed.
But, so then I always think, well, how are they going to get deep with that cardboard? But that just...
Yeah, raspberries, you can't go wrong. You could throw them on top of the cardboard and cover them with wet leaves and they'd grow. Yeah,
Okay.
you can't slow them down. So the year we bought our house,
Yeah.
I owned a bicycle store, and one of my clients gave me, she was thinning her raspberry bed and gave me 3 little raspberry starts about this big on a Saturday afternoon. And we were closed Sunday and Monday, and my house, or my workplace, got really hot because it was the 2nd story of a building. And I forgot them, left them 3 days out of just totally bare root, sitting on a piece of cardboard upstairs. I thought, oh man, I killed them. But I took them home, planted them in a rocky area. We didn't have any beds made. And watered them in and walked away. Did our other things. We were learning the garden then. And then about halfway through the summer, we decided, we're going to make a bed where that stuff was. So I got in, this grass had all grown up, and I'd forgotten completely about the fact that there were raspberries in there. So I weed whacked it level and went, what's hanging up this weed whacker? And it was, of course, the little raspberries that I whacked off. So we went ahead and built beds and grew vegetables in that bed. Didn't dig down very much, just built on top. The next year, go back there, raspberry canes this high. They're hard to kill. And so we started digging up that bed, and there were raspberry roots running all through it. It was amazing.
Did you turn it into a raspberry?
It is now our raspberry
Good.
bed. Yes, it is
They
now.
won.
It is now. They did. So yeah, we harvest.
Are you supposed to dig under when you have like a garden that it's in the fall and there's dead, stalks and things? Are you supposed to leave that on top of the ground or dig it under when you're like for the fall? Like
So
before
we
the
tend to
snow
throw
comes?
our stalks in a compost bin just because we have one.
But if you in a place, because like a
you
lot
don't-
of gardens or apartments, we were not allowed to compost, so they didn't
So
want
compost in place. So you just chop that stuff up and leave it right.
you
where
leave it
is.
on top.
Leave
then.
it right on top, and then
Okay.
then rake up some leaves and throw that on top of that.
Okay.
And
And
call
it's
it good.
not good to dig it under, or I mean,
Well,
I've heard
so
like both stories. sides
so
of
the
this.
more you disturb the soil, again, think of the soil. Don't think of the soil as inert dirt, because that's not what you want. What you want is a colony, right? You want it full of life. So if you lived in an apartment building full of life, and every year somebody came by and tipped the apartment building up and rolled it around a bunch and then set it back down, how many people would survive? Probably a couple, but not most. So
I get it,
so
yeah.
tilling is not is again, it makes us feel better because we like that pretty loamy soft look stuff, but it's not what's working for the forests.
Could you speak to mycelium? Because we have this upcycled, it's been upcycled twice, waste from the far north fungi, and we're adding it to every bed, and we're adding it into birch bark. We've added it to spent grain, and we're composting it. Can you speak to why, what it is?
Sure. Well, so fungi are the miners of the plant world, or they're their own world. They're fungi, but so they are the only things that can actually move minerals.
Woohoo!
Okay, so they're miners. They can take a whole bunch of silica that's over there in that corner and make sure that the plants that need silica can still get it over here. But every time you turn the soil, they're little fibers that run through the soil. In fact, the largest single organism in the world, last I heard, it keeps changing, was a slime mold in Oregon called the humongous fungus that covers 3/4 of Oregon. Yeah,
One entity.
one organism.
It's the internet of the forest
So
or the earth.
So by adding more mycelium, again, she's trying to create more, or give the opportunity for more diversity in her mycelium network. Because again, same thing. You have mycelium. What we think of as fungus is actually the fruit of the fungus. The mushrooms are just the fruit. The whole soil should be laced with that, and that they transport the minerals. Then the minerals are part of what the bugs use to break stuff down and feed the plants. But it's all a web. So the less you can disturb it, the more you can just build it and let them do all the work, the better your life is,
That's
and the better
systems
their
thinking.
life is. Pardon?
Systems thinking.
Systems think, yeah. It's building, instead of thinking of building a garden, think of building an ecology. Right? That's your goal. Your goal is to build, and the other great thing is, so then I don't have to, my garden's 700 square feet, I grow 2,000 pounds of food. We spend less than 7 hours a week to do that.
Woo!
That's not 7 hours a week each, my wife and I, or my wife, my son and I. That's 7 hours a week total, man hours. So I work 4 hours, my wife works 3 hours, blah, 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 whatever. Now there's some surges. Spring, there's a little bigger rush. Fall, there's a little bigger rush. But otherwise, it's not. And one of the other things that we're big on is doing high intensity gardening, which just means that we plant lots of stuff.
And I will say that we are out of time.
Oh, okay.
We have another workshop coming up. So
Yeah,
this week just really needed to be about soil. I mean, it's got a life of its own. So we can come back to high intensity later when you teach your second workshop, if you want to touch on it again, or next week if you want to, if people want to know about it still next week. This is a very much, people put their requests in for what they want to learn, and then we have the experts.
So can we have a little bit when you before we the
For sharpening, sure.
I'd like
We
to
can
have-
ask. We can see what everybody wants to
I'd like
learn
to have
about.
a Friday,
Yeah.
'cause I want-
But
yes.
I just don't want to take advantage of Christy's time. She biked over here and she's teaching the next workshop. So thank you very, very much, Dawn.
Thank you.
I appreciate it so much.
Dawn, would you be willing to share your contact information?
You again.
Um,
Oh, I love
Your